What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me today is none other than Chris Fedor. And Chris, we have some news to share, and we got to be around the practice facility for the first time in what it feels like a long time when it comes to actually having to watch practice rather than just a shoot around. And after that practice, the Cavs came out with their injury report, and there was a name on there that many might have been surprised to see. Max Strus, listed as out for the Washington Wizards game on Friday. There was a lot of speculation coming in about whether he would play, whether he was ready, whether the organization thought it was a great time to bring him back due to them playing on Friday, then on Monday, then not playing again until Friday again. What do you think happened when it comes to Max being listed as out for Friday's game? Was it a step back? Was it anything that had to do with him, or is it just another air of caution?
I think it's just another air of caution, Ethan. I saw Max after practice earlier this afternoon, and he was walking fine, and he was talking with members of the Cavs PR staff, and then he was talking to a couple of assistant coaches and one of his teammates as well, and he was walking fine. He wasn't limping or anything along those lines. Seemed to be like a guy who was preparing to play at some point in the near future. He was also wearing a backup jersey, not a wine-colored starter jersey, so I think that's noteworthy. You don't always want to make too much of that because those things have changed in the past, and coaches have gotten onto that, and they've done it on purpose to switch around the jerseys and stuff like that. But I do think the sense that I get is that, initially when Max comes back, when he's ready to make his return, he's going to come off the bench, and it's just easier that way to manage his minutes. And I'm told that when he does come back, it's probably going to be around 20 minutes a night, give or take. So it's just easier to have that kind of guy come off the bench rather than be in the starting lineup. But beyond that, this is the interesting wrinkle that I don't know that enough people accounted for, Ethan, is that Max did not play in the preseason. He played 9 minutes in the preseason. So he missed all of preseason. He missed the first 25 games. He just had his first official practice, not with the Cavs, but just in general, with the Cleveland Charge on Friday. So he's had a couple of practices with the Charge. And then he had 3 straight days of practice, 2 in a row in Miami, and then earlier today in Cleveland. And everything along the way has been, how does his ankle respond? But 3 straight days of practice, that's a lot different than what he has done throughout the course of this rehab. That's a lot different than what he did over the weekend with the Charge. And I think a lot of people inside the organization, Max included, wanted to see how his ankle was going to respond to that level of increased exertion. And, it would not surprise me if Max just said, hey, look, I want a couple more days. The schedule affords him an opportunity to do that. The way that this team has played without him affords him the opportunity to do that. The way that this weekend sets up with a game tomorrow against Washington and then 2 straight days off before playing against Brooklyn on the road on Monday allows him that kind of opportunity. And I just think the Cavs have told Max from the very beginning, do not rush this. There is no need to rush this. We don't want a situation like we had last year with Ty Jerome, right? If you're not feeling it, if your ankle's not all the way there, if you're not totally comfortable with it, do not come back too early. And I think that's part of what is going on here, that after 3 straight days of increased physical activity, the most activity that he's had in a row in an opportunity to come back from this ankle injury, that Max is just looking at the situation saying, you know what, it's probably best for me and probably best for the team, despite the fact that I'm mentally, I want to go. I've had enough time on the sidelines. It's probably best for me and it's probably best for the team that I just take a little bit more time because the schedule allows me to do that.
On top of the schedule allowing him to do that, the confidence being instilled from the team being 21-4 without him
Sure,
has got to help a little bit, right?
sure.
And I think it's just when you talk about coming back, not even 100% ready, like 200% ready, no questions, nothing on that end. It's interesting to think about what Max has been able to do in the last 3 days because, I mean, you and me go into the gym 3 days in a row. I know we'd be feeling it even if we weren't
Yeah.
injured. So I feel like it's an interesting concept when you talk about how he's progressed and it not really seeming like a step back or a regression from his health, more so just like a cautious approach from the Cavs, which we know them to do. And this is it's an interesting game, right, Chris? When people try to predict or try and guess when players are going to come back, when players are going to be traded, when players are going to get signed, like, and we have said this on this podcast at an abundance, like it is a fluid system in the NBA. Never say never. And if you listen to our podcast, there was a certain tone that Chris had been using about Max Strus, about the impending return on Friday. Like, I was talking to somebody inside the Cavs organization earlier today, and for those listening, this is what the pecking order is. It doesn't matter what organization it is. It doesn't matter whoever might have put it out. It's Chris Fedor and everybody else when it comes to Cavs knowledge being into the know of the Cavs organization. And that's coming from somebody inside the Cavs organization. So just take that with a grain of salt. Next time people start, oh my God, what's Max gonna do? Whose minutes is he gonna take? Like, all great questions, right? But there's no rush on any of this, especially in a year where the Cavs going up against a hampered Washington Wizards team who is going to be without Keyshawn George, Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, all out for Friday's game. Like, they feel like very comfortable they can win this game again without Max Strus. So, on top of that, there's other people on this injury report for the Cavs that I think we should get into a little bit. The first being Evan Mobley. We know he injured his ankle in the most recent game against Miami in the first half, did not come back in the second half. He is listed as questionable for Friday's game with a left ankle sprain. Chris, we got to see him work out after practice. He was not a participant in today's practice. What have you heard about his availability, his progress, and could he be another game time decision when it comes to taking another day for rest for his development, progress, and healing time?
From what I heard earlier today, Evan can play, but that doesn't mean he's going to play. I think the ankle is at a place where if they were playing in an NBA Cup game or if they were playing against the Boston Celtics or something like that, that he could play on it. But we have seen that the Cavs are cautious when it comes to injuries. They know the importance of Evan, and I think they're going to be cautious with him. I haven't heard for sure if he's going to play, if he's not going to play. I've just heard that he could play if that is what all parties decided was the best thing. But it would not surprise me at all if they just hold him out against Washington, maybe even against Brooklyn, and then give him all of next week because they've got another break in the schedule for the NBA Cup semifinals and finals. Give him another opportunity to just get more and more recovery time for that ankle. But from everything that I've heard, it's a minor ankle injury. It is not something that they have been concerned with from the very beginning. There is no reason that they're concerned with it, even after his workout earlier today. He was doing some movement. He was doing some movement shooting. He was doing some catch and shooting. All of those things were really positive signs. He didn't have a brace around his ankle when he was going through his workout. He didn't have a sleeve on his leg when he was going through his workout. So all those things are pretty positive signs, but they're playing against Washington. And I think everybody understands that when you play against Washington, you're able to make some lineup decisions and you're able to make some decisions when it comes to guys with injuries and coming back from those that maybe you wouldn't be able to make in another situation. So everything that I've heard is that he continues to make progress. They're not concerned with it. He could play, but that doesn't mean that he's going to play. In fact, like if I had to guess, like because it's Washington, they probably hold him out.
And the other person that's on the injury report that we had to give an update on is Isaac Okoro. He's probable for Friday's game. He had a left knee contusion that's held him out the last two games. But, I mean, he was out at practice. He was in Miami practicing. He was
Yeah.
doing all these different things with the team. He was playing football with the Cavs team as quarterback, as wide receiver, all these different things because we know Isaac thinks he's the best athlete on the team outside of swimming because he can't swim. But Isaac being there, doing his normal workout, his normal shooting routine after practice today, 3 days after practices, as Chris mentioned, being in Miami twice and then Cleveland today. I think it's a good sign for him. Obviously, being probable is also a good sign, but him being on the injury report, it just might be a little bit of a play by the Cavs. But Chris, when it comes
I
to
I even forgot that he was injured. I mean, it's been so long since the Cavs have played a game, and they've been in Miami, and they've been doing all these different practice things and some of this team bonding stuff on the court and whatnot. I sent out the subtext earlier today to our Cavs insiders, and I had the update on Max Strus and Evan Mobley, and I had to send a second subtext because I completely forgot about Isaac Okoro because it's been so long since the Cavs have played, and because every time I've seen him recently, he's looked just fine, and it was never anything that the Cavs were concerned with. It was just again taking a cautious approach because they're able to do that based on the depth that they have, based on the lead that they've built up in the East, based on the way that they've played, based on the way that the schedule sets up, and all that kind of stuff. I would expect the Cavs to continue to take these kinds of approaches when it comes to any injury, minor, major, small, big, whatever the case may be.
and then it comes back down to the matchups, right, Chris? Like we talked about how important and how Kenny Atkinson could use this rotation and roster to play with those different things. Like you're not in a perfect world, you're not having Evan Mobley go up with the Washington Wizards bigs. That's
Yeah.
not who you want him matching up with. That's not a advantageous matchup for Evan Mobley. That's more of a Jared Allen game. Also a
Yeah.
reason why the Cavs like keeping that guy around, right? And then you talk about Jordan Poole being one of the main targets on the defensive end for the Cavs on the scouting report because of what the Washington Wizards are lacking and how Poole's going to have to go on one of his pool party runs for them to have a shot in the game on Friday. Isaac Okoro could be helpful in that defensive stifling when it comes to being on the perimeter and all those different things, as well as having Dean Wade back. But Jordan Poole is less of a matchup that Dean would be taking, especially when you talk about what the Washington Wizards are going to be missing on Friday night. But I think I want to move on to the next topic, which is what happens when Max comes back and how Kenny Atkinson is going to continue to use this rotation. Because I do think it's a positive, a positive reinforcement that Craig Porter Jr. is getting minutes in the G League. He's on assignment for Friday's game, so he's out. He'll be with the Cleveland Charge, and I think it's something we kind of expected coming into last year and especially into this season when you talk about the depth that they had and what we've been able to see from this Cavs roster from the start. But Chris, I know I want to rewind just a second to the Miami trip because we talk about the extracurricular activities that Donovan and Darius and all those different things, and also the team bonding that they were doing in practice. What was your experience like in Miami?
Oh man. So, every year around this time, Ethan, they have this art festival that goes on. I forget the name of it. I'm probably going to butcher it. My Uber driver was talking to me about it. I think it's called Basil. And again, if I got that wrong, I apologize to anybody that was participating in it or anybody that goes to Miami around this time because they love being a part of it. But because of that, you can't stay in the Brickell area very close to the arena because that's where the art gallery is going on. I guess you could if you want to, pay out the butt for hotels in the area. But I stayed in Coral Gables again. I've gotten to know the Coral Gables area very, very well. And I like the area. It's a little bit further from the arena. It's a little bit further from, depending on which airport you fly into. But I've gotten to know the area. I've liked the area. When we were in Miami, Ethan, the weather wasn't super warm. It was kind of in the low 70s during the day, and it dropped to the mid 60s at night. And I know people that are in Cleveland listening to this podcast, like, yeah, dude, that's great. It's like 12 degrees here in Cleveland. When you were in Miami, there was snow coming down, and it was not as nice here. Totally get that. But for Miami, it was a little bit different. And a couple of days before we arrived, I guess it was in the 50s there in Miami. So I'm staying at this hotel in Coral Gables. And the first thing that I do when I get into my hotel room, when I check in, I take everything out of my suitcase and I hang it nicely in the closet. And then I mess with the thermostat. I try and find the temperature that I think is best suited for me. And, I've been a Marriott member for a number of years, 11 years now. That was one of the first things that I was told when I joined the NBA beat. It was basically like Chris Haynes introducing himself to me and saying, "Hi, I'm Chris. Get a Bonvoy account. You're going to need it." Because you want to have that loyalty. You want to rack up the bonus points. There are perks to this job, obviously, the flight miles and the Marriott points and the kinds of vacations that you can go on, and helping out your family if they want to stay at a Marriott for a week, or if you want to go on a vacation with your family and you want to stay at a Marriott for a week or a week and a half, you don't have to pay for it. You rack up all those bonus points. So it's been 11 years now. I'm like lifetime gold. I'm ambassador elite at this point for this year, which is the highest of the high. So every time I check into these hotels, they treat me like a king, and I love it. It's fantastic. It makes me feel like a big deal, even though I'm not really a big deal. So I get into the hotel room, and the first thing that I do is I try and mess with the thermostat. Ethan, it will not let me toggle between cool and warm. It won't. I can move it up and down. I can change the temperature in the room, but it stays on cool the whole time. So I think the thermostat itself, when I checked in, the room temperature showed 68 degrees, which, that's not all that comfortable for me. And I totally get it. You're in the Miami area. They don't want you staying in their hotel. They want you going out and enjoying Miracle Mile or going to the beach or whatever. So people that go to Miami and they stay in these hotels, they don't stay in their hotel room and do a bunch of stuff in their hotel room. They go out and they enjoy the nightlife and they enjoy everything that Miami has to offer during the day. But I was going to be spending some time in the hotel room doing some writing, watching some football, whatever the case may be. So it won't let me toggle between cool and heat. I was trying to turn the temperature up because it was kind of chilly in my room. So I get on the phone. I call down to the front desk. And they answer the phone, and I say this, word for word. By the way, I say this. I use my status when I have to use my status. Thank you very much. I say, "Hey, this is Chris Fedor, room 914, ambassador elite member. I got a little problem in this room where I checked in." I said, "I don't know if this is a full-on hotel thing or if it's just my room and you have another room available that I can switch to. But I can't change the thermostat from cool to warm. Like, I can't make it hotter in my room than what it is." The guy says to me, "Yeah, that's a hotel thing. We have it set as a master control where our hotel controls it, and it stays on cool the whole time because, sir, you're in Miami and it's warm in this city." And I said, "Okay, totally get that, but I hear it was colder last week, and it's a little bit chillier now, and it's probably going to dip into the mid to low 60s overnight. And what do you want me to do? Sleep in a hoodie and sweatpants?" because it's going to be colder in my room. And he said, well, last week when it dropped down into the 50s, we changed the master control in our hotel so that it was set to heat instead of cool. So that if anybody was a little bit concerned about the frigid temperatures that were rare this time of year, we made it work for them. And I said, all right, that's great. You can do that. Can you do that right now? Can you change the master control in the entire hotel? I am Ambassador Elite, and I'm trying to use every way that I can possibly use in order to get you to fix this. And he said, no, sir, we can't do that for just one guest in our hotel, and nobody else has called about this. And I said, okay, if I knock on the guy next to me and ask him to call down, and it's 2 people that call instead of just one, is that going to increase my chances of getting this switched? Once again, he said, no, sir, that's not going to work. So I was upset about that. And during my 2-day stay at this hotel, I was actually researching other hotels in the area to see if I could switch hotels on a moment's notice because I was not comfortable at all. Ethan, I'm in Miami. I'm in my hotel room. I'm underneath these covers, and I'm in a hoodie and sweatpants because I was cold. I was all bundled up. I didn't want to get out of my bed because I didn't want to be cold initially when I was making those trips from whatever, my hotel to lunch and back to my hotel, or when I was just trying to write at the computer desk. One of the nights, I went underneath the covers, all bundled up like Nanook of the North, and I just wrote on the bed because I did not want to have the covers off of me. So I was miserable. I was not happy about it. Well, miserable is a relative term. From the way that I usually get my way in these hotels because of my status, I was displeased about it. So they send me an email. Was it yesterday? Yeah, I think it was yesterday. They send me an email and they say, feedback required for the recent stay. And I'm sitting there oh, baby. I've had this drafted in my phone. I've been waiting for this email. So they don't know who they sent that email to. And I fired off this angry email saying I'm never staying at your property ever again. This policy is ridiculous. How could you possibly have more than however many people in the hotel? I didn't even say. I said 100 plus people in the hotel that can't control their own freaking thermostat in their room. How is that even possible? How do you have a master control? Everybody inside their own hotel room should be able to set the temperature to what makes them most comfortable. Because me and Steve next door, we don't feel the same. We don't come from the same place. We aren't bothered by the same things. And then Lila down the hall or whatever, she probably has a different feel of this thing. But me, coming from Ohio, wanting to be in the warmth, I can't even be warm in my own hotel room? What is this nonsense? So am I out of bounds here? Or do I have a point? I'm hoping to get some bonus points out of this complaint because they didn't do anything when I complained initially. They didn't fix it for me. It was still on a master control, and I still couldn't toggle the thing. How do you stay in a hotel? And look, it wasn't the nicest Marriott in the world, right? But it was a Marriott property. All of those things are nice. I should be able to set the temperature in my own room, shouldn't I?
I mean, I definitely feel like you should have control over the heat in your own room because I definitely had to do that when I was in Charlotte and it was actually cold. Outside and windy and all those different things.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because when I moved back to Baltimore and I was getting an apartment, because I've only lived in apartments my whole life. I haven't upgraded to a house or one of those kind of buildings yet. And that apartment complex had a similar policy. And it got to the summertime and we only have heat in the apartment. It's May, June. And we have, so they had to dish out personalized air conditioners that you had to plug into the window to get like all of the pollution from outside being brought into your house for air conditioning. I was like, it looked like a mini robot. And it was so bad. So I can understand. I can understand the feeling of not having control of your own room, apartment, hotel room, whatever you want to call it. I definitely had that on my list when I moved to Cleveland of making sure where I live had that feature. But I just think it's funny because like you talk about like people having different opinions on the weather and like they probably were like, you're from Cleveland. You should be used to the cold.
Yeah. Like this dude is calling us from his hotel room in Miami, Florida, and we have to explain to him why we have the thermostat in every single room set to cool. Like, who is this guy? Seriously. He's complaining about the cold in Miami. But I'm telling you, like, it wasn't comfortable in the room. It wasn't, to the point where I'm never staying there again. I don't care what the price is. I stayed there in part because I was trying to do a favor to the company. I was trying to be responsible. I was trying to make it as easy as possible on everybody with our travel budget. So I tried to do that. I am never staying there again, ever. Because if I can't control the thermostat in my own room, like, what? Why would I want to stay there?
And
imagine, here's the other thing. And this is what I said over the phone, too. I said, like, what do you tell people that came to Miami and didn't look at what the temperature was going to be like for their upcoming stay, and they weren't like me, and they didn't bring hoodies, and they didn't bring sweatpants, and they didn't bring a jacket, and they didn't bring all this other stuff for that kind of weather? Like, what do you tell them? Sorry?
Suck it up.
That's basically what they said to me.
You should have planned better. Like, I know.
I mean, if I didn't have a hoodie, multiple hoodies, and I didn't have sweatpants, I would have been an angry dude for those 2 days. And I'm telling you, like, you would have been able to tell based on my writing, based on the tone of my stories. I just would have been a cranky old man.
It would have been like Kermit smashing away on his typewriter in that one meme.
Yes.
Writing your angry email.
That's exactly right. The Cavs lost in Miami again. What else is new?
The overall record is now 51-16 at home for the Miami Heat. Yeah. Oh man! But back to business. Unfortunately for Chris, because I know, Chris, I think somebody pointed out in the YouTube video, like you had your window up, even a little bit earlier. You had the back of your window up. It looks frozen on the outside. So somebody was talking about, hey, not only are you in cell block C, but you are also in a frozen cell. Like, what did you do to get this treatment?
Yo, this basement is not the warmest place in my house. That's for certain. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty chilly up there. I actually have, and I hope you can't hear it. I don't think you can hear it. But down here in the basement, in the corner, I've got a space heater going. Every time I come down here to do a podcast for 30 to 45 minutes, I got to crank up the space heater, which that's ridiculous too, but I don't want to make it too hot while Elliot's trying to sleep and Holly's trying to sleep. That'd be pretty selfish of me. But when I'm in my own freaking hotel room and I'm the only one there, I'm allowed to be selfish.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
At least I think so. I can't wait till I get a response back from my complaint and see what they say and what they do, if anything. Because, like, I don't know. Like, when you hit, like, Control F and you look for words within a story or within an email, I got to see how many times I used Ambassador Elite, because it had to be at least 10. I wanted to make it known that my status within their guidelines is the highest of the high, where it's so high that I get my own butler when I check into these hotels, where they like reach out to me and ask me what time I'm arriving and whether I need somebody to take my bags up to my room for me. Like I have my very own personalized butler when I check into these places. So yeah, it had to be about 10 different times that I used Ambassador Elite.
I usually don't record with like my air on, like the heat on in the apartment. I'll like turn
Yeah.
it off. Again, a feature that I didn't have in Baltimore, which I love being able to toggle
So
on and
weird.
off the heat in my own
The
apartment.
little things.
The little things, man. And my girlfriend was out here like watching her show as I was preparing for the podcast, and I come out and I'm like, "Why are you like bundled up? Like you don't have control of the heat?" And she was like, "Well, it's like I like to keep it at 70." I was like, "So increase it to 75."
Yeah,
Like if you're
right.
cold, we don't have to live like savages anymore. You can increase the heat. But so I put on a windscreen for my microphone, and I put the heat up. And I usually don't record with the air on, but it is on now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you hear that in the background, sorry folks, I tried. Um, but again, I think thank you for coming to Chris's TED Talk about hotels and heat and all those other things, especially getting a little more insight to the travel like of
Yes.
Ambassador Elite of
Tell me in
cleveland.com.
the comments if I have a legitimate beef. I believe that I do, but maybe I'm wrong on that one. It wouldn't be the first
YouTube
time I'd be wrong.
YouTube is going to eat this up. And you wouldn't be the first person to be wrong when it comes to predictions this week, when it comes to being in Miami or anybody playing or any of those different things. But no shade, maybe a little bit. But if you talk about what this Cavs rotation has been able to do this season, you talk about how they have utilized a lot of different pieces in this roster. And Chris, we've said it a lot during the beginning of the season. Kenny Atkinson has thrown out lineups that we hadn't seen before, that we
Yeah.
hadn't seen this year. Has there been any indication with Max Strus's return coming soon that he's going to diminish heavily minutes, or is he going to try and play with a certain amount of guys? I know in the beginning of the season, he said he was going to have a roster or a rotation of 10 to 11.
Well, here's the thing. Anytime you bring somebody back, especially somebody like Max, who, he played a career high in minutes last year, and it's not going to be like that for the Cavs because the Cavs are committed to trying to get through the finish line, and there's a bigger picture in play, and because they have the reliable depth that they do, that they're able to spread out these minutes, and they're not in a situation where they're running these guys into the ground, and they're physically and mentally worn out by the time the playoffs roll around. And I think part of that was Max. I think certainly part of that was Donovan and Darius and some of these guys. So the highest minute player that the Cavs have this year is Donovan at 31.9, which, compared to other stars around the NBA, that is a low number, but that's by design. Again, there's a bigger picture in place here for this team, and there's reliable depth that they can get away with playing Donovan just 32 minutes a night and still being 21-4 because of the contributions that they've had off the bench. Ty Jerome, Karis LeVert, Sam Merrill, whoever it is. But when you bring somebody else like Max and he's going to play starter level minutes eventually, not immediately because he's going to be on a minute restriction, but eventually he's going to play starter level minutes. So we're talking somewhere between like 26 and 32. I would say because of the way that Kenny has operated and because he's trying to keep those minutes down, I would say it's probably more like 26 to 28 in that range. If you're introducing that into the lineup and you haven't had that for the first 25 games, guys are going to get cut. But I don't think he's going to cut anybody completely. I don't think he feels like he can cut anybody completely. Look, I think you're going to have a situation where some of these guys, Isaac Okoro, Sam Merrill, George Niang, depending on game, depending on situation, depending on how they're performing, you're going to have a situation where these guys believe that they should be playing more than they are on a nightly basis. And they're going to be right about it because they've earned these opportunities based on the way that they've played, based on the way that they've filled in for Max while he's been out. But they're thrilled about what Max is going to bring to this team. They've been looking forward to this for 7 weeks now. Kenny Atkinson has been talking about how he's going to weaponize Max Strus since training camp, going all the way back to training camp because of his cutting, because of his continuous movement, because of his ability to pass, his ability to get downhill and finish at the rim, the gravity that he brings to the table. Kenny's been really, really excited about being able to unleash that. So Max is going to have a big role in this rotation. But I think the way that Kenny is going to look at it, Ethan, is he's going to try and play 11 because I think he feels like these guys have earned it. That means that Craig Porter Jr. out, Jalen Tyson out, Tristan Thompson out, Luke Travers out, JT Thor out, but that's basically the way that it's been this entire way. It's just going to be a situation because I think he's going to want to play all 11 that a couple of minutes from Karras, he loses some. A couple minutes from George, he loses some. And I think he's just going to try and pick a couple of minutes here or there from these different guys to try and make sure that he can play 11. But I'm just saying, it's tricky. Coaches in the NBA don't like playing 11 because it gets a little bit tricky and it's hard to play 11, especially consistently. A lot of these coaches are comfortable with 9, 10, some even 8, in the case of JB Bickerstaff last year. But, Kenny believes in the depth of this team, and Kenny has seen the kind of impact that these guys have had. And I don't know how he could honestly sit there and say to himself, I'm going to go into a game and not play Isaac Okoro, or I'm going to go into a game and not play George Niang, or I'm going to go to a game and not play Sam Merrill. You know what I mean? Based on the way that those guys have played during the first 2 months of the season. So I think he's going to try and play 11. I don't know how successful it's going to be, but playing 11 is then going to require just taking minutes from all of the guys that are already in this rotation and trying to find a way that adds up enough to utilizing Max the way that the Cavs ultimately want to utilize him.
And Chris, if there's any coach that has a blueprint to how this can be done, it's Kenny Atkinson from being with Steve Kerr. Because we talked about this on this podcast, like he loves playing 12. And still, to this day, we don't know how he does it. But when you talk about the Cavs roster and the minutes that they've allocated already this season, of the players that have played 20 or more games this season for the Cavs, all of them are averaging 18 or more minutes, right? And obviously, Dean Wade and Karis LeVert have only played 17 and 19 games, but they're averaging 22 and 24.5 minutes per game. So it's interesting to think about how these minutes are going to get allocated, even with Max Strus, whose minutes are going to be taken away. We've talked about that on a separate podcast. Sam Merrill, Isaac Okoro, and how those different matchups are going to entail those things because of how similar Sam Merrill's game is to Max Strus. Are they going to want more offense? And that, again, I keep saying this, but it goes back to the baseball lineup thing that I've talked about on this podcast and how Kenny has – we talked about it as silly at the beginning of the season, but he mentioned it. He was like, we don't know who we're going to want to play at small forward. We're going to go based on availability. We're going to go based on matchup, and it could change. And obviously that is not the traditional way of an NBA lineup because you like having a set rotation with a starting lineup. You switch them out every so often. The minutes are usually the same. We've seen that with Donovan and Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and Jared Allen this season. But now it's going to be a little bit different. How Kenny Atkinson is going to use that is definitely something that I think is going to be one of the more interesting focal points for this team, especially as Max Strus' minutes ramp up and if he earns that starting role as well. But Chris, I know you talked about it and touched upon it briefly. Jalen Tyson, Craig Porter Jr., and we talked about this in the offseason, comparing it to J.B. Bickerstaff's tenure here and how he utilized the two-way guys and guys that were on contract but usually weren't getting minutes at the bottom of the roster. And I said that I would have wanted JB and the Cavs organization to utilize those guys and give them opportunities in the G League to get minutes, to get confidence, to get shots up and learn about their game and all these different things. And it feels like Kenny Atkinson is doing that by putting Craig Porter Jr., who's on a standard NBA contract, on assignment with the G League Cleveland Charge. Jalen Tyson, a guy who's been down there as well. And if Max returns shortly, I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, we've also seen them play in 2 games in the same day, so it is possible.
It's a situation where there are members of this organization that have had many conversations, face-to-face conversations with both Jalen Tyson and Craig Porter Jr., and just reassuring them of their place and their standing within this organization, even though minutes aren't currently available to them. They're on the best team in the NBA. Jalen Tyson was drafted 20th overall. One member of the front office recently talked to Jalen, I'm told, and said, yeah, you might be more talented than some of these guys that are playing more than you, but look at the teams that those guys got drafted to. And it's just the situation that you're in. And we did not draft you for 2024, 2025. We drafted you for whatever you could give us this year in your rookie year, but it was about the long haul for you. And we still believe in your future. We still believe in your talent. We still believe that you are going to be a piece of this team. And, part of the reason why the Cavs have reassured those guys is because, if you talk about projecting forward, not just this season, next season, the year after, this is a very expensive roster. You've got to have playable bodies that are on team-friendly, cost-effective, long-term control contracts. And Jalen Tyson and Craig Porter Jr., in a way, they're going to help offset the books. When Evan Mobley's making all the money he is, and Donovan Mitchell, and the commitment that they've made to Darius Garland and Jared Allen, you need guys in your rotation that are making something that allows you to have team building flexibility, and you don't have to start making cost cutting maneuvers or something along those lines. And that's kind of the role that Craig is going to be in. And look, if we're talking about next year, Ty Jerome at this point, Ethan, has played himself out of a comfortable range for the Cavs, just from a salary standpoint and what he's going to command in the open market this offseason if he wants to explore that. That's how front offices have to look at these things. That's how front offices have to think. So if Ty Jerome leaves at the end of this year because he prices himself out of a comfortable range for the Cavs, where do they go? They go to Craig Porter Jr. They turn to him as potentially their backup point guard of the future. So they want to continue to reassure him that, that's how they view him. And we're committed to your development. We're committed to your growth and evolution. And the best way for that to happen for you right now is not with the Cavs. It's with the Cleveland Charge. And that's why the G League affiliate is here. That's why it's considered, a quote unquote developmental program. That's why they run the stuff that we up here with the Cavs run. So those conversations have been had a bunch throughout the course of this stretch of the season. And they're going to continue to have those conversations with Jalen and Craig. And I thought it was really cool when talking to both those guys about playing twice in one day. They both said that they were open to it because they just want minutes. It doesn't matter if it's in the G League. It doesn't matter if it's in the NBA. They just want consistent minutes and an opportunity to continue to work on their game and develop their game. And the best way for them right now is behind the scenes, because there just aren't opportunities, not consistent ones, not at the NBA level right now.
And Chris, I think it's a testament to Jalen Tyson, who is, albeit one of the most confident people you will talk to about himself, is taking patience and learning and soaking up so much knowledge when it comes to just the NBA. Because sure, you could have gone back to college for your senior season and all these different things, and But now you're in an NBA locker room. Now you're in an NBA weight program, a nutritional plan, all these different things that
Mm-hmm.
can impact your career when it comes to how you are going to project into the future, which is more important than the now for this Cleveland Cavaliers team that is already 21-4 and projected to potentially be a contender in the Eastern Conference, if not in the NBA. And when you talk about production and comparing him to other players that are getting more minutes around the league, here's the
Yeah.
list, Chris. Jared McCain, Philadelphia 76ers, bottom of the East. Dalton Connect, Los Angeles Lakers, currently eighth seed in the Western Conference. Stephon Castle, San Antonio Spurs, bottom of the West. Bub
Yeah.
Carrington, bottom of the East with the Washington Wizards. Yves Missy, New Orleans Pelicans, bottom of the West. Alexander Sarr, Washington Wizards, right? Like these are guys, Donovan Clingan, like
Yeah.
Portland Trailblazers. Like these are guys that may get more minutes, may have more gaudy stats and all those
Mm-hmm.
different things. But Jalen, you get to train with Donovan Mitchell, which we got to
Yeah.
see him do today. We saw him in the far corner at practice working with Donovan on different moves, on going through the workout that Donovan goes through. Like it was different to see him do that because Jalen usually is on the closer corner, just working on his 3-point shot, getting conditioning in, one-on-one drills with trainers, all those different things. But he's taken a page out of Donovan's book. He's talked about being Karis LeVert's rookie. Like Karis LeVert has claimed him as his rookie. And that's ironic because that's the kind of position that he could be going for in the future,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Ty Jerome as well. Like there is, for a rookie to come in to a team that doesn't need him, I don't
Yeah.
think there's a better organization for him to fall to because of the camaraderie, the chemistry, and how these guys treat one another, love on one another when it comes to this group. Because it doesn't matter. And Donovan said it today when I asked him about minutes changing and having to figure that out in the grand scheme of things. There are no egos on this team, and they will all go to war for each other because they know the man next to him will do the same.
Yes, that is correct. And that's what this team is built on. This is a selfless style that they play within their offense, but it's also just a selfless team. That's the way that they've constructed this. And Craig Porter Jr. showed last year that he can accept a role, that he understands a role, that he can handle a situation where he's in and out of the lineup and he can still be effective and he can still stay ready. And the same thing for George Niang, the same thing for Isaac Okoro. Like, think about Isaac, right? Isaac, somebody who came into this year, he was essentially replaced in terms of the kinds of things that they were going to get from various players and where he was in the pecking order. And he went through the whole restricted free agency process where like that can be really, really difficult on a player because it's a business and so many of the teams focus on what he can't do and the things that he isn't, you know what I mean? So he comes into this season and he's what, like eighth, ninth in the rotation, something like that. Max Strus was going to be the starting small forward. It was clear that Kenny Atkinson wanted to use Dean Wade in a big minute role off the bench, and he was more comfortable playing him at the 3 as opposed to the 4. Now he's still cool playing him at small ball 5 and the versatility that Dean has, but still, Isaac was kind of behind Dean in the pecking order. Dean got the first crack to replace Max Strus in the starting lineup when Max was lost with his ankle injury. So here's Isaac Okoro, comes into the season probably a little bit uncertain about what his role was going to be. New coaching staff, new viewpoint, got to prove himself all over again to this group. Doesn't get the starting job when Max goes down, has to come off the bench. Then the stuff happens with Dean. Isaac goes into the starting lineup, and he doesn't lose that job because he's played so well. And now that Max is back, he's probably going to get pushed down the depth chart again. But like the Cavs understand his value. Kenny Atkinson sees the growth that he's made on the offensive end of the floor, and he's not just going to completely dismiss him. He's not going to completely go away from him. But like, think about that varied role for somebody like Isaac. It isn't the easiest, but he has shown that it just doesn't matter. Like, he's not going to complain about anything. He's not going to ruffle feathers. He's just going to go out there and deliver a workman-like performance. Whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, whether he's in a high-minute role, a low-minute role, he can find a way to blend, and he can find a way to be effective in that kind of role. And that can mess with guys. It can be a mind bleep for some of these guys. But they have guys on this roster that have shown that they're okay with that they can accept that, and they can still thrive in that kind of varied situation that they're going to be placed in. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that helps Kenny when it comes to making these kinds of lineup and rotational decisions that he's going to have to make in the coming weeks with Max, his return, first of all, being imminent, and then eventually after a week, maybe 2 weeks, his minute restriction gets lifted, and then it becomes even more of a numbers crunch for somebody like Kenny. Knowing what he has on this roster, knowing the buy-in that has already taken place, that makes it a little bit easier on him to make some of these delicate decisions.
And I think it's important to wrap this podcast up for guys on the roster to have other people to talk to who are in similar situations. Like, there are multiple guys, as Chris mentioned, that have shown their adaptability, their versatility, and their willingness to change their role for the benefit of the team. Like, I don't think there's a better situation for Jalen Tyson. Like, you got to come in, and Craig Porter Jr. said, hey, I went through the exact same thing last year where they sent me down to the G League once. I proved that I didn't belong, and I came back up. And due to there being injuries, due to there being opportunities presented, I proved that I was worth a full contract with the NBA, with the Cavs. So it's like you have guys that can plug and play, like Sam Merrill talking to Dean, Sam Merrill talking to Isaac, Sam Merrill, like whoever you want to plug and play into those situations. There's different guys that can have conversations internally, and also Donovan talked about it today. Like there is a way for these guys to have conversations, even with their star players, about things going on, and that's an article I'm working on that comes out soon about Damari Carroll being a player coach and being able to connect those guys. Tristan Thompson being a pipeline for the coaching staff on the bench, being able to communicate the feelings of and the emotions of the players on the bench. I think everybody has their role on this team. That's why it's been such a great start to start the season. But
yeah, I think the other thing is it's easier to do that. It's easier to have those kinds of conversations and those situations when you're 21-4. I think that goes without saying. Winning makes it easier to accept these lesser roles. Winning makes it easier to have difficult conversations and not take them personally and things like that. And who knows, maybe winning is just going to be a thing that the Cavs do all season long. I'm not saying that they're going to be the dynastic Golden State Warriors and go 73-9. But I think, they have shown that they have a really, really good offense, and they're back in the top 10 in defense. And when you have that kind of statistical and analytical profile, winning tends to follow you. So maybe that is just going to be something that's synonymous with this team. And it makes it easier throughout the entire season to approach it this kind of way and have those kinds of conversations. But I do think that that's something to monitor. If there's adversity that hits, if there's losing that hits, what does that look like? What does that sound like? How does that change things, if at all? And maybe it doesn't change things. Or maybe you start to have, a little bit of chirping behind the scenes or something along those lines. It will be interesting to see how this all plays out. Because like I said, these guys want to play. And these guys believe that they've earned an opportunity to play. How can you sit there and say, Isaac Okoro, we're going to take some minutes away from you, given what he has given to this team in the first 25 games, right? How can you sit there and say, Sam, like, sorry, we're going to have to take some minutes away from you because Max can do a lot of the same things that you do on the offensive end of the floor. It's just a delicate situation that the Cavs are in. And that's part of the reason why, Ethan, December 15th is a big date in the NBA because more players are available to be traded, the ones that signed in the offseason. The Cavs are getting calls, and teams around the NBA are like, hey, what are you doing with X player? What are you doing with Y player? Are you going to keep all these guys? Are you going to have room for all these guys? Do you want to get rid of two? You want to do a 2-for-1 trade? You want to do a 3-for-1 trade? That sort of thing. They'll continue to get calls because I think a lot of people around the NBA are monitoring this situation very closely and seeing how it all plays out and seeing what the Cavs do. And if they have too many bodies who would be quote unquote expendable around the time of the trade deadline. That's a bigger conversation. That's further down the road, but they are getting those kinds of calls because teams around the NBA are saying, you got too many guys. You can't play them all.
And I mean, that goes without saying that the Cavs have 3 of the top 10, I believe it is, when it comes to players coming off the bench and plus minus that have played in 15 games in 15 minutes or more per game. Like that's in the NBA bench rankings. Like that's insane when you think about what the productivity has been like off the bench for the Cavs. And I think it's just a testament to what this team has been able to do to start the season. But with that being said, we will have more insight for you guys after Friday's game. It'll be on YouTube almost immediately after we get done recording, and then it'll be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts after the Wizards game on Saturday morning at 5 a.m. This will be up on Friday morning for you guys. But with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.